Hi, today is June 11th, 2023. I got these fake eyebrows from the fake glasses. And here are my poems for the day. The first one is poem number 943 for the year, Nestled. Yesterday, Mama and I went to the village community boathouse at Pier 40. The boathouse was actually a shop where boats are restored or repaired or maintained or whatever. I wasn't all that interested until I saw a big canoe with a kayak nestled inside it. I refrained from asking Mama if she had ever heard of the phrase, the little man in the boat. I didn't think it was necessary to tell her what the kayak nestled in the canoe made me think of, but apparently I thought it was necessary to tell you. Poem number 944, Theory Disproven. Before the boathouse yesterday, Mama and I visited the dog run again, and my theory that dogs don't take a shit in the dog run was disproven in spectacular and ceremonious fashion. I failed to take a picture. You'll have to take my word for it. I'm not into scat. I can't go for that. No can do. Poem number 945, Perplexing. I don't understand why deodorant that comes in stick form never smells like an underarm. Poem number 946, Instead. Instead of an action, you wanted distraction. Instead of declension, an honorable mention. Instead of intention, incentive, invention. Instead of inaction, dissatisfaction. Poem number 947, To Think. Sometimes E is she, but not that last time. She wanted action so much more than distraction, but she kept on distracting herself instead of staying focused on the task. At least she wasn't focused on the flask. She knew enough not to believe that she could use a drink. Rather, she needed to think, and not to let a drink use her. Poem number 948, Snapping Out of It. Sometimes she is me, like, for example, that last time. There was a lot of unwanted distraction and unwanted inaction, and a desire to detangle and find a new angle, a desire for de-entanglement, and a plunge into the sediment, and a lapse into sentiment, and a clasping, and a grasping, and a gasping, and a collapsing, but then a clapping, and a snapping out of it, and before too long, the beginning of another song. And the last poem for the day is poem number 949, third person. It's inspired by Maya Kobebe's Genderqueer. I did a version of it yesterday, but I finally finished it today. This poem was mostly written a month ago. It's in 4 parts. Third person in 4 parts. Part 1. When I was 10 or 12 or 11 or something, I read all of the Oz books by L. Frank Baum. I lived a lot in fantasy, and I wanted Oz to be real. The second Oz book, The Land of Oz, follows the adventures of a boy who is not a boy named Tip. Spoiler alert, at the end of the book, we learn that Tip is Ozma, the rightful ruler of Oz. As a baby, she was kidnapped and turned into a boy so that no one could find her and another could take the throne. I wondered whether such a thing was possible and whether it could have actually happened to me, whether I was actually a girl. Part 2. In high school, I read a lot of feminist writing, de Beauvoir, Brown Miller, Kate Millett, Friedan. Then I got into the harder stuff, the Scum Manifesto and the Dialectic of Sex. I became a man-hating feminist. I didn't exactly want to cut the man out of me or cut anything off. I wanted to not be who I thought I was because I didn't know who I was. I didn't even know how to think about who I was. Part 3. One thing that I came up with, to paraphrase Wanda Sykes, who I believe was referencing me, was, wouldn't it be wonderful if it was detachable? Long before 1990, when I wrote that shit, early 80s, I'm going to say, I had read a column in the Village Voice where a woman was singing the praises of her strap-on, how she could have a cock and not have a cock, penetrate with it or be penetrated with it according to her will, and I was like, I want that too, but as the poet A.R. Ammons once said to me, writers never do anything, they just write about it. That wasn't true, but it was what I needed to hear at the time. And part 4, last part of the last poem of the day. In the early 80s, when I was in my early 20s, I started reading poems about me in the third person because I was tired of writing I all the time. A few years later, I started writing poems about me in the third person feminine because I was tired of writing I or he all the time, but also because sometimes I liked writing about me as a she. And last year I started writing they, their, them poems because sometimes I don't feel like writing about me as a he or as a she. But the problem I have with they and them is how people are like, they are a songwriter, because I am like, shouldn't it be they is a songwriter? And last month, thanks to Maya Kobabe, I wrote my first ERM poem, and I've written several more since then. And I love writing poems about air feelings instead of my feelings, and about M instead of him or her. And I love being able to say he is instead of they are. And I'm happy to have so many third persons to choose from, and to be able to inhabit the non binary as well as the female, and to have a better choice than they them if I should ever choose to change my pronouns. Okay, that's it. Did I mention that was inspired by my co-babe's genderqueer? It was, and we did a Bushwick Book Club about that yesterday. But as always, I appreciate you and I thank you. Yes, appreciate you and thank you. I really like this pitter patter, let's get at her shirt. Letterkenny, good show.